Good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, good afternoon, guys. Thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you all so much for taking the time out to join me this afternoon as we have this discussion about Tobago's autonomy. Um, it is a discussion that is suddenly back in the air. A couple months before elections, again, it's back in the air. And it is actually, that is part
Autonomy.
of why I wanted to have this discussion. Because it seems like Tobago's autonomy has been and forever will be a political football that is being played with the people of Trinidad and Tobago. So, again, thank you all for tuning in. Please take a second to share the live, take a second to tag people in the live, take a second to invite someone to come and look at it with you. Please note, though, that if you start a watch party and there are comments in your watch party, I can't see the comments. And I would like this to be interactive so that we can chat with each other, so that we can communicate with each other, so that I can answer questions as they pop up and so forth. Thank you so much, Ashford, for tuning in. Thank you for tuning in. Thank you also, Mr. John, for tuning in. Appreciate it. Please, again, share the live, share the live. Thank you, Miss James, Marriott James, for tuning in. Thank you so much. For some reason, if you had put like a pretty little emoji or something, I'm not seeing it there. So I don't know what that's about. So anyway, as I said, I don't want to be too long today, and there is a big chunk of in what I want to cover includes several things. It includes talking about what is being said right now, but I also want to take a little bit of time to go back in history, not too far back. I'm not going to be one of those historian kind of things because I'm not a historian. But I want to go back a little bit, a couple years, maybe 10, 15 years or so, to where we've been, 10 years or so, to show where we've been, to, to highlight why what is being discussed right now in the Tobago space, in the Trinidad and Tobago space, as it relates to Tobago's autonomy, is really a slap in the face. And I will continue to say it is a political football that is being played by both parties in Trinidad, in the parliament in Trinidad, because both are showing that they are not 100% serious about this. And it is what it is. So let me start by, and you all know I like to do this. Let me start by playing a little clip that was of the Prime Minister this week, or maybe last week. He was on Tobago Channel 5. It was the same day where he spoke the foolishness about all of the people who got food cards and who got grants and whatnot, whatnot. And we know that wasn't true. We've proven that wasn't true. By the way, I understand people starting to get it. Rental, some being paid, and some people are getting the grants now. So that is several weeks later. But anyway, that's not what this live is about. Um, so I want to play a little piece of what he said last week or maybe the week before as it relates to this Tobago autonomy thing. Because I think that is going to set the stage. That is going to set the stage for how this entire discussion is going to flow. And after I play what he said, then I would talk a little bit about what Dr. Winford James's response was, and I would go into why Dr. Winford James said what he said. Okay, so let's have a listen to Dr. Rowley, whatever day that was, this week, last week, whatever day that was, on Tobago Channel 5.
The context of Tobago's self-government, you have to find a way to prune that ministerial responsibility in the constitution, giving Tobago greater autonomy. And that is not by just jumping on a platform and saying, I can't give you. You have to change the law. And if the people in the parliament are not prepared to change the law, then that is what remains. So unless the UNC is in agreement to make that change, right? It's not going to be made by the peer, then we can't. We don't have the authority to. So anybody promising you self-government here in Tobago, especially when they're not in the parliament, is just so much hooey. Right? What we are hoping is that the Joint Select Committee will advance its work and get to a point where they can put before the Parliament significant changes for Tobago that the parliamentarians can agree on. We in the PNM we are the only political party that by resolution in our Congress, at our convention, said that we are committed to further Tobago's self-government. And to do that, the London administration carried out the consultation in Tobago. The PNM, this administration took it to the parliament. It's in the parliament. We have members on the committee, so does the UNC and independents. They are doing that work. That is where self-government is. So anybody in the upcoming election here talking about self-government, especially if they have no seat in the parliament, just wasting your time. What we need to do is to try and accelerate it through the parliament, and we on the committee, and the committee reports to the parliament off and on, and that there'll probably be a report before the parliament dissolves in July to say.
Okay, so in essence, so the audio wasn't that great, but in essence, what he is saying is that the PNM currently does not have enough votes in the parliament to pass this bill, to turn this bill into a law, because it requires a special majority. In essence, that was what he's saying. PNM only has, what, 20-something, UNC has the others. And he's insinuating that UNC will not support it. And basically, in essence, that's it. So let me just go back a second to explain why even all of that is absolute foolishness. But let me just go back a second to explain. One, we knew from the beginning that this constitution amendment bill is to change the constitution. And to change the constitution, you need a special majority. If it were just an act, a simple act of parliament, you may need a simple majority depending on what the act is about. But since it is a bill that will change the constitution, you need to ensure that the majority of people in the House of Representatives and the Senate agree with it. So you need a special majority, which means you need 3/4 in the House of Representatives and 2/3 in the Senate. This is not new information. We all knew this 10 years ago, 15 years ago. We all knew this. We all knew this. So for him to jump up now and sound so surprised that he does not have enough votes in the parliament, because PNM only has so many votes in the parliament, to do this is utter foolishness. Because we knew going into this that you needed both PNM and UNC people coming together, because it was a constitutional change that the bill is asking for. So that discussion, that whole part of it is foolishness. Considering that when they did the whole thing with changing the money, they had to take that to parliament. That needed a special majority. When all of those things, when they're talking about intercepting your telephone calls and all of those different things, the bail bills, all of those things need special majority, and they have been able to pass all of those bills as it relates to all of those things with a special majority. So it shows that the idea of needing a special majority is not something that is new, and they have had special majorities in the parliament within the last year, passing different things for Trinidad and Tobago. So the fact that that has not happened in this case for this particular bill is utter foolishness. And of course, they are doing exactly what we thought they would do. Wait until you get very, very close to the elections, having done nothing for it. And I would go through the time series so that you see how much of nothing that they have done. And then it's like it was true to form. He's suddenly blaming the UNC for not voting for it, when in fact, he has not even brought it to the parliament for the UNC to vote on it. And I would explain that. And that is also something that Dr. James, Winford James said, that, this would be a perfect opportunity for them to bring it to the parliament and have UNC people say they are not going to vote on it for whatever reason. And then we can say, well, you see, we brought it and UNC didn't vote for it. But we are now in June, And it seems like, from what he said, that they may be ending the life of the parliament in July, August, somewhere around there, which means we really don't have a whole lot of time for them to go through the process. So, what has happened? What has happened? Let me try to bring up a couple of things, and I am hoping that this works well because I'm going to have to share different aspects of my screen to ensure that you can see what's happening. I want to take you back to, let me see if this works here. Chrome tab, give me a second. Me make sure that it works because I need you to see all of these different little pieces of it. Let's see, is that working? It probably isn't. Okay, so even if it doesn't work, I would just tell you what to go searching for. I would tell you what to go searching for. If you search for review of THA Act for debate soon, it's a Guardian article printed on, well, it's published on the Facebook, on the website on Wednesday, 31st August 2011. Wednesday, 31st of August 2011. And that website speaks about the fact that there was a John Prince committee. We all know Dr. John Prince. He died, I think it was last year. He died, a well-renowned Tobagonian, a well-respected Tobagonian. He died last year, but he was in charge of that committee. So I'm going to ask you to just search review of THA Act for debate soon. And it says, the John Prince Committee, appointed by the Tobago House of Assembly to review the Tobago House of Assembly Act and relevant amendments to the Constitution of Trinidad and Tobago, will hand over its final draft amendments to the House of Assembly tomorrow at 1:30. So this was August 31st, so tomorrow would have been September 1st in 2011. If I am not mistaken, that John Prince Committee started working, I think, in 2009 or so, if I am not mistaken. Don't quote me on that, but I know they had been working for some time. And the members of that John Prince Committee included Dr. John Prince, Dr. Eastland Mackenzie, Dr. Rita Pemberton, and Carlos Dillon, as well as the senior counsel, Russell Martineau. So those were the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 people: Dr. John Prince, Dr. Eastland Mackenzie, Dr. Rita Pemberton, Carlos Dillon, and senior counsel, Russell Martineau, were the members of that John Prince Committee. Okay? I actually went through my emails trying to find a copy of the report, and I couldn't find it. I actually had emails sending to a million different people. Did you get a copy? Did you get a copy? Does anybody have a copy? Does anybody have a copy of what this report says? I couldn't get a copy. No, I saw an email where somebody said they had a hard copy and they were willing to let me see, but that copy was so precious. They were not going to give it to me. I can't even remember if I finally saw it or not, but anyway, John Prince Committee, they did their report, and they did, as this said, that report was to be given to the Tobago House of Assembly on the 1st, January, February, March, April, May, June, July, August, September, so the 1st of September, 2011. So I want you all to note the dates. 2011 is when that happened, 2011. It's important to also note that in a press conference, and again, let me see if I can pull this up again. Let's see if it works, because I want you all to see this for yourselves. But you know this thing about technology, and technology only chooses to work when technology wants to work. Let me see if this will work this time. It's not. Okay, so let's just ignore that. So On March the 30th, 2012, this was a press release that was sent out by the Tobago House of Assembly. And if you go to the Tobago House of Assembly's website, this press release is there. Let me share the link with you so that, let's see if I can share it here so that you can go to it yourself and see exactly where it is. So this press release says, and I quote, this is again the 20th, the 2012, March 30th, 2012. The Executive Council of the Tobago House of Assembly is appealing to all Tobagonians to sign the petition attached to the People's Motion, reaffirming their support for the bills approved by the Tobago House of Assembly to provide internal self-government to Tobago. That was 2012. In addition to this petition that they were sending around, what they also did, and I'm reading here verbatim, in addition, the Executive Council has appointed a four-member commission headed by former THA Chief Administrator Alan Richards to, and it's in quotes, examine the proposed legislative offerings for conformity with the wishes of the people of Tobago, unquote. Other members of the commission are Attorney Deborah Moore-Miggins, Senior Counsel Gilbert Peterson, and physiotherapist Dr. Vern Allen. The commission has up to May 31st, 2012 to complete its work. The commission has up to May 31st, 2012 to complete its work. That commission was created to pull together all of the documents that had anything to do with Tobago autonomy, pull them all together, including the John Prince Committee, including all of the others. And I would again I'll send you links. And that group, that included, and let me read the names again, former Chief Administrator Alan Richards, Attorney at Law Deborah Moore-Miggins, Senior Counsel Gilbert Peterson, and physiotherapist Dr. Vern Allen. Those four people worked together, and they were to work up until May 31st, 2012 to complete their work. Now, let me stick a pin in it right there and give you context in terms of what was happening. If you look at, and let me pull up my dates, because I am not very good at dates. I'm not a historian at that. If you think about elections, and this is where the political football thing comes in, if you think about elections, there was a Tobago House of Assembly election in 2013, in January 2013, right? In January 2013, there was a Tobago House of Assembly elections in January 2013. It's important to note that PNM has been in charge in Tobago for the last 20 years. So during that whole period, the People's National Movement have been the administration in charge of Tobago for the last 20 years. Of course, there were shifts in Trinidad, where, for example, in 2007, we had PNM with Patrick Manning. In 2010, and this is what's important, in 2010, remember when Patrick Manning did the snap election and then he lost, and then the People's Partnership came in 2010. So think about this again. We had now 2010 People's Partnership, UNC, COP, the whole hoopla, TOP also, all of them part of the governance in Trinidad. And you would recognize that it is really just around that point where PNM and Tobago started riling up again and started talking again about autonomy for Tobago, and we're going out and we're doing all of these consultations and we're bringing John Prince together and we're bringing these committees together, blah, 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 blah. All of that is what was happening at that time. So we had PNM and Tobago, and we had from 2010 People's Partnership UNC in central government. So at the 2013 Tobago House of Election, and this is why I would always say this is political footballing happening. You would have, if you pull up the parliamentary website, and again, it sucks that this thing isn't working for you to see my pages. If you pull up, if you search for, and I would put the link here. I would put the link so you could go back and search for it. The third session of the 10th Parliament, there was a bill laid by Honorable Kamala Prasad Bissessa on the 7th of January 2013. The 7th of January 2013. Now, the 7th of January 2013 should cause you to think, because remember I said the THA elections were that same January, I think the 21st or something like that was that same January. And if you look at the parliamentary website, the then UNC-led People's Partnership, Kamala Prasad Bissessa, laid this bill in the House of Representatives, and it is the first reading. And the link that I just posted, you can go read it all yourself. The first reading was on January the 7th, 2013. And the second reading was on January the 16th, 2013. At the second reading, we had Kamala Prasad Bissessa, Dr. Keith Rowley, Dr. Delmon Baker, Mr. Volney, Herbert Volney, Honorable Anil Roberts, Honorable Errol McLeod, and Dr. Surjatan Rampachan. Okay, so those were the people. If I am not mistaken, that was actually the sitting where Dr. Keith Rowley walked out saying that they will not participate in any talk about Tobago autonomy just before an election. And there was a big hoopla, get up and march out. There was a big thing about it, and they refused to participate because it was happening. Actually, it was happening like the week before elections. As a matter of fact, I remember that was the year when there was the debates, THA election debates. And when a question was asked, and in the debate was the Mr. Jack Ashwood Jack was there, Mr. Orville London was there, I think Mr. Hochoy Charles was there. So there were three of them. When there were questions about the when there were questions even about the Tobago autonomy bill that was laid before Parliament, it seemed like Mr. Jack couldn't even answer the questions because he may not have even actually seen the document that was laid in the Parliament. So that is telling you how much of a hoopla, how much of a, all kind of madness that was going on at that time, just before elections. Just before elections. Again, showing you that, are we really serious about this? Or are we really just doing this for election period? Just to say, well, we did it. Are we really, really doing it? Or is it really just for election? And I would send I would send links to, or I could email it to you. But you could get it online because all of the bills are available online. That same link that I just gave you, it actually has, you could download the actual bill that was placed before Parliament there to look at it. Now, there were two key things that were important in that bill, and those are two key things. If you hear UNC people, People's Partnership people talking about those two key things, you would hear them talk about this. It says Clause 10 would amend Section 13 of the Constitution to provide that the appropriation for Tobago in respect of a financial year would not be less than 6.9 nor more than 8% of the national budget. So right now, just so that we have a frame of reference, right now, because Mr. Hochoy Charles in his administration went to the Dispute Resolution Commission, we now in the Tobago House of Assembly get between 4.03 to 6.9% of the national budget. No matter how much what the budget is, if you look at it, that is where it is. And usually for the last couple of years, it has been exactly at 4.03. As a matter of fact, I think what they do in Trinidad is work out how much is 4.03 and then divide it up among the different divisions in the THA, because it comes out as exactly 4.03%, which is ridiculous. So you would hear People's Partnership people saying that in that bill in 2013, what they were proposing is that Tobago gets between 6.9% and 8% of the budget. So that is a fact. That is what was written there. The other thing that's important to know in that bill is that while currently Tobago is defined, or the powers of the Tobago House of Assembly is limited to 6 nautical miles around the island of Tobago, this bill in 2013 would have given the Executive Council control, in essence, of the island of Tobago and up to 11 nautical miles around the island. And that is important. That is important because if you listen to those people at that time, they were telling you that, yes, 6 is what we have now, 11 is what we are giving you, which is better. And yes, 11 is more than 6. Sure, we can't argue with that. 11 is more than 6. So those were the two quote unquote improvements, or the big ticket issues. There are other issues that we can talk about, but those were the two big ticket issues. Having between 6.9 to 8% of the budget and having 11 nautical miles around Tobago that is under the jurisdiction, basically, of the Tobago House of Assembly. So that's critical. That's important. If you look at the website, and I really, really wished I could have pulled it up, what this says on the website is House of Representatives, first reading 7th of June 2013, second reading 16th of January, not June, January, 7th of January 2013, second reading 16th of January 2013. And the last thing on that page says that the bill lapsed on the 10th of July 2013. 10th of July 2013, the bill lapsed. That was the last thing about that. So we don't know what happened between 16th of January and the 10th of July, but on the parliamentary website, it only says that on the 10th of July 2013, that bill lapsed. Full stop. That is what happened there. So since then, what now? So that was what, 2013, and I am continually pushing those dates so that you see the kinds of games that we are dealing with, the kinds of games that we are continually dealing with. So that is 2013. After that, we practically heard nothing about any of that stuff again because, well, we don't know. Like, election come and gone, so there is no reason to talk about autonomy for Tobago again because, well, election come and gone. It is what it is. But remember, I told you about a commission that was established to look at the constitutional amendments and the wishes of Tobago. And I remember I told you that there were 4 members of that commission: Mr. Alan Richards, Dr. Vern Allen, Mrs. Deborah Moore Miggins, and Mr. Gilbert Peterson, senior counsel. Now, they actually created a phenomenal document, and in the document, it gives very clear guidelines. It says that they held their first meeting on Saturday, the 31st of March, 2013, 12. And remember, I told you in the press conference, they said that they were supposed to be done with their work by May or so year, that June. So the completion, what this says is that the final completion date was 2012. Now, I want to highlight something, and I'm going through this slowly, and this is one of those. This is not a hyped up kind of. I ain't cussing nobody, but I want to go through this because everybody really, really, really needs to see what is happening and where we are going and why, again, all of what we are hearing and all of what we are seeing is such a puppy show, for want of a better term. That report, let me try this one more time. Let me try this screen share one more time. And when you know something might not work, but yeah, so let me try it anyway. Let me try it one more time. Let's see here. And it's still not coming up. Well, I'll send you all the documents. If you do want the documents, I could email it to everybody because I have it on my computer. I will email it to anybody who actually wants to see it. Now, it's important to note that that 4-person group that included Deborah Momiggins and Vern Allen and so forth, one of the things they did was do a desk review of all of everything that was available to them relating to Tobago autonomy thus far. And I would read out what they reviewed, okay? They reviewed the 1977 motion by A&R Robinson for internal self-government. They also reviewed the 1980 Seamungle draft, which is where we basically got the 1980 THA Act from. They also reviewed the 1980 THA Act. They reviewed the draft proposals of the Manning administration between 1992 and 1995. They also reviewed constitutional and legislative arrangements for Tobago, which is a document that was done by Guya Prasad Committee. I don't even know who that was, but they reviewed that document. They also reviewed the Tobago, the THA Acts number 39 and 40 of 1996. They reviewed the work of Reginald Dumas' team. And let me stick a pin in there, because if you remember, if you were around in that time, I had just come back from the United States finishing school. So I was around 2006, 2005, 6, and I came back in 2007. And I remember at that time, Mr. Reginald Dumas was also going around doing consultations about Tobago autonomy because this was important, and they were going to schools and all over the place doing consultations. They also reviewed a document which was submitted by the Tobago Forum for Consensus on the Constitution, which was led by Mr. Christo Gift, Senior Counsel. Because of when I came back and because I was always interested in this kind of stuff, I was also a part of that Tobago Forum for Consensus that was led by Mr. Christo Gift. And what they did is actually they had consultations, they had surveys that they sent out for people to complete. They did all of that, and then they compiled that into a general report that said this is what we've found. The 4-man group also looked at documents provided by the John Prince Committee. Remember, I spoke about the John Prince Committee. That 4-man group also, or 4-person group, also looked at the People's Partnership Manifesto, because going into the 2010 elections, the People's Partnership spent a good bit of time talking about Tobago's autonomy. And even going into the 2015 election, they also were talking about Tobago's autonomy, which would not have come up yet at this time. They also reviewed legislative proposals to the government by the THA. And finally, they looked at the Attorney General's Green Paper, because one of the things that came up just before the THA elections in 2015 3 is that there was a green paper laid by the Attorney General. All of that was part of the hoopla just around election time, just around election time, just around election time again. All of these things were happening. And this commission, pulled together by the THA, was responsible for pulling all of those pieces together and coming up with a single Tobago position. Now, I am stressing on that because one of the things that we've been hearing several people say several times is that Tobago does not know what it wants, and Tobago does not have a single position, and Tobago this, Tobago that, Tobago the other, right? But what this report does is actually pull together all of those different things that Tobago said it wanted in the various kinds of various versions of the various versions of consultations that happened throughout all of those years. They pulled together all of that and came up with this final thing. One of the things that one of the things that came up, and I'm going to read it here specifically. Baseline for comparison. One of the specific mandates of the Commission is to compare the various legislative offerings to determine their conformity with the wishes of the people. We keep hearing about the wishes of the people. As a baseline for the comparison, the Commission has adopted the set of wishes referred to above, which were elicited from the people of Tobago and laid out on page 7 of the status report of the working committee that was published in late 2008. This list of wishes mirrors those extracted from the other reports, particularly those from the Reginald Dumas-led Calder Hall Accord and the Christo Gift-led Tobago Forum for Consensus on the Constitution. And those include these things: equity of status between the islands, the two islands, and a legislative framework reflecting such equity, a federal system of governance, authority in the THA to impose taxations, because we can't do that right now, the ability to borrow to fund Tobago's development, jurisdiction and economic control over our marine resources, removal of cabinet dominance and override of decisions made in Tobago, elimination of the conflict between the Section 75 of the Constitution and Section 25 of the THA Act, which basically says THA can really do anything, except if it conflicts with what the Section 75, except if it goes against what Cabinet says. So which means we really can't do anything on our own. We could only do it if it coincides with what Cabinet says. So I continue with the list. Critical. Definition of the boundaries of each island. That was critical. Freedom for the THA to make laws to govern Tobago. And let me just stick a pin in that right there, because that is in essence because the Minority Council led by Mr. Watson Duke, with my colleague Assemblyman Farley and myself, because we knew all of this history that has been going on and on and on and on and on, and we recognized what was happening, and we could have predicted long before it even happened that PNM could come now and basically say, well, we want to give all your self-governance, but UNC ain't gonna vote for it, blah, 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 blah. That is one of the reasons why we went to the House last month and basically said, since all of this madness going on up there, can we just go back to the Parliament and say to them, while you all work out all this other stuff, let us allow Tobago to make laws relating to the things in the 5th schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act. Because right now, Port of Spain, for example, can make laws relating to Port of Spain. Arima Borough Council, or whatever it's called, can make laws relating to Arima and send it directly to the president, while Tobago cannot make laws pertaining to Tobago and send it directly to the president. Tobago has to make a bill in Tobago, send it to the cabinet in Trinidad, cabinet sends it to Parliament, Parliament debates, and then when they pass it, it goes to the president, which is exactly what is going on right now. So I'm just sticking that in there. Another thing that they wanted, consistency between the term of office of the THA and the national government. Another thing, definition of a relationship between parliamentarians and the Tobago House of Assembly, because you recognize that it's always a battle. When it's PNM in Trinidad and PNM in Tobago, like PNM in Tobago, they're stunned stupid and they can't say nothing and everything nice. But when it's PNM in Tobago and People's Partnership in Trinidad, them is the loudest and they're always talking about encroachment and blah, 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 blah. You're wondering if it's the same set of people who are having the same conversation. So definitely a definition of those two relationships. And the last thing on the list was legislation for the wider participation of society in the decision-making process of the Tobago House of Assembly. Those were the things. Those were the things that they, yes, I'm now seeing and I think you were right. There was also a committee somewhere around that had Martin George, Chrislyn Moore, and Hamid Ghani. You are right. You are 100% right. So that is another set of people who were doing work. I don't know if I've seen their reports or where that went or anything like that. I don't know. But you are right. Why all those steps when it that's the whole point. Exactly, that is the whole point. Ashford, why all those steps? It's ridiculous that we have to go through all of those loopholes when it comes to dealing with a law for Tobago, when in Trinidad, Port of Spain can just decide we want to charge $2,000 for parking left instead of parking right, and just write that up and send that to the president, and the president assents to it. And Parliament have nothing to do with that. So, and that is what we were saying. Tobago needs to be able to have that kind of authority, which we currently do not have. So I got to, let me take a drink of water. Now realize with all of that history, that is why when our dear Tobago boy Prime Minister last week or week before, whenever he said it, behaved as if we just start this whole story and we didn't know that we needed a special majority, and Tobago still really don't know what Tobago want, blah, 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 blah. You see why all of this was just really a slap in the face. And it was disingenuous. And it really is showing that they are not serious about this. So let me go a step further. So that was since then. We went 2010, 2013, just before election 2015, the whole talk came up again, and we said, well, we ain't gonna do nothing just before election because it's just before election, blah, 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 blah. 2017 THA elections, and Orville went out. Orville London, our former chief secretary, went out with a bang, because if it's one thing he can say, it's that he did finally leave something to send to Trinidad, and he did. He did send something to Trinidad, and that is what we are talking about now. So, again, I really, really wish this technology worked the way it should for me to show you. If you, I'm going to show the link. I'm going to share the link so that you can follow it. So even if you don't look at it now, you can go back to the live and you can find the link. If you go to the parliamentary, Trinidad and Tobago parliamentary website again, you would see that in the fourth session of the 11th Parliament, the Constitution Amendment Tobago Self-Governance Bill 2018 was laid. And what date was it laid in the House of Representatives? The 9th of March, 2018. It was laid in the 9th of March, 2018. And I need you all to pay very close attention to that, because we are now in June 2020, a whole 2 years since. A whole 2 years since. So that was laid. And after it was laid in March 2018, Typical is that these things go to a joint select committee, and the joint select committee interrogates what's there to make sure that all of the I's are dotted and all of the T's are crossed. Okay. So this thing went to a joint select committee in 2018, and we don't know. That is the catcher. 2018, this thing went to Parliament. It then went almost forthwith to a joint select committee. And since then, my dear people, we do not know. And that is why the utter foolishness that the dear Prime Minister talk last week or week before, whenever he was in Tobago on Channel 5, talking about no, we're waiting for the Joint Select Committee and blah, blah, blah. If you did not know, and I'm sure most people did not know, that is since 2018, this thing went to that Joint Select Committee. So he now wondering if the Joint Select Committee would send their report by June, July, so that they can go back to Parliament. Because once it goes to the Joint Select Committee, the JSE has to do their report to say, yeah, let's add this, let's take this away, whatever, and then take that to Parliament. We are in June. It is now what, the 14th of June? So I am going to play for you, and I want you all to pay special attention. It is, I hope this works. It is kind of lengthy, and I apologize ahead of time for it being lengthy, but it is critical because while we had the Joint Select Committee happening in 2018, we did have representation on that Joint Select Committee, and they did come to Tobago. They came to Tobago March, April, right after the Joint Select Committee was commissioned. They did come to Tobago, and they did solicit views from people in Tobago about what to do, what is happening, and so forth. I want to pull out, and I apologize. I need you all, again, because they are trying to hoodwink us. I need you all to pay special attention. It is going to be a lengthy clip, but it is worth listening to every word. I pulled out, I was trying to pull out, we're hoping it works, the segment where Dr. Vanas James spoke before the Joint Select Committee. And he identified one very critical thing that is important for Tobago. Because remember, I said earlier that one of the things that was obvious, one of the things that has been clear for Tobagonians for the longest while, is that we want a clear definition in the Constitution of what is Trinidad and what is Tobago. And when we sent the document to Trinidad, we did include very clear definitions of Trinidad and Tobago in the document. But when it went to Trinidad, those things somehow were not included. And let me take a second. Let me take a second. Okay, it's going to take about a minute to read what we sent to Trinidad and why this is important. It says part of what the bill is supposed to do is to, within the Constitution, repeal a certain section and substitute it with the following, right? This is what we said. 2A. The Republic of Trinidad and Tobago shall comprise the island of Trinidad, the island of Tobago, and other islands of the archipelago that are enclosed landward of the archipelagic baselines, as well as the archipelagic waters, the 12-mile territorial sea, and including the seabed and subsoil situated beneath the territorial sea of Trinidad and Tobago and their super adjacent airspaces. The Republic of Trinidad and Tobago shall exercise inter alia sovereign rights over the living and non-living resources pertinent to its exclusive economic zone and its continental shelf situated beyond the territorial sea and extended to the bilateral boundaries established with Venezuela, Barbados, Grenada, and neighboring states, whether such other areas as may be declared by the Parliament. Okay? So that is part of it. That's the first part. We wanted in the Constitution a definition of this entity known as Trinidad and Tobago. We also wanted in the Constitution the definition of an entity known as Trinidad, because if Trinidad and Tobago are two islands coming together to make this thing that I just read, then we can define Trinidad and we can define Tobago then. Trinidad shall comprise, and I'm reading, Trinidad shall comprise the island of Trinidad and other islands of the archipelago that are enclosed landward of the archipelagic baseline drawn around the island of Trinidad, as well as the archipelagic waters. The 12-mile territorial sea measured seawards from the said baselines, as well as any other inland waters between the island, blah, blah, blah. Okay, so that is Trinidad. We also wanted a similar definition of Tobago. Tobago shall comprise the island of Tobago, Little Tobago, St. Giles Island, Marble Island, Goat Island, Sister Island, and other offshore islands, and basically the 12-mile territorial sea around it. So in that document that we in Tobago sent to Trinidad, it had very clearly a definition of Trinidad and Tobago, a definition of Trinidad the island, a definition of Tobago the island, with an understanding that if the country is Trinidad and Tobago, if Tobago is in essence to be the land and the 12 miles, Trinidad is the land and 12 miles, then what is remaining, as in everything that is in the sea and in the air outside of that little piece, we would then have to, we would know that it belongs to Trinidad and Tobago, right? What they sent in the JSC, what we recognize very early in the bill, is that, you see that whole thing what I read, that whole story there what I read, where Trinidad and Tobago is what, Trinidad is what, Tobago is what, all of that whole piece of tralala, they take out. And they replace it with, and I will quote, a Tobago statute shall have effect in Tobago, Little Tobago, St. Giles Island, Marble Island, Goat Island, Sisters Island, and such areas of the archipelagic water of Trinidad and Tobago, including any islands, the seabed, and the subsoil that lies within 11 miles from the low water mark of Tobago. Now, see that? That is where the bait and switch came in. Because what they have done in essence there is take out, because remember, this is going into the Constitution. What we are doing is enshrining within our Constitution definitions of these two entities, right? They quickly took out the part that was important to both of us. Definition of Trinidad and Tobago, definition of Trinidad, definition of Tobago. And they only included, to be put in the Constitution, a definition of Tobago. Now, this is simple maths. If A plus B equals C, and we know what A is and we know what C is, and B is the rest. So if Trinidad and Tobago is all of this, including all of our waters, all of our seas, all up behind Charlottesville where they're drilling for oil, and we say that Tobago is only land and 11 nautical miles, then what can we infer is Trinidad? See, if it is not written, we can only infer. And we will be correctly inferring that if in the Constitution all you put is the definition of Tobago, and you did not put a definition of Trinidad, and the country is known as Trinidad and Tobago, then if this is Tobago, then the rest has to be Trinidad. That is where the problem lies. And let you listen. Again, please pay special attention. I may have to fast forward to little parts, but please pay special attention to this.
For its, in my personal opinion, of the true beings and happenings of what is really going on in the government. That is my only concern. If there was transparency and honest financial statements being made periodically and on time, the general public probably would not have voted a third and fourth time.
Okay, so you think putting a limit on the chief secretary's term would treat with these financial concerns that you have?
It would also treat with financial concerns, and it would also make that person in position to use his or her time wisely and make the most of 1 or 2 terms in office.
Okay, well, Ms. Hernandez, I look forward to your written submissions for consideration. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. James.
Thank you, Chair. I see you know my name. Thanks to the committee for coming to Tobago and holding this.
Mr. James, I just want to recall, did you go up against me in Aruka South?
No, no, I wasn't that fortunate. And you never ran in Tobago, so. My name is Vanus James. Somebody said doctor. And I have been part of a number of committees organized here in Tobago. I can put specifics in writing for you to consider this issue in anticipation of the fact that you would be coming here. As far back as September, we've been thinking about this and working through some of the details in the bill. I'd like to begin by making the first observation that the Bill A and Bill B that I got a chance to read in 2016 looked a little bit different to this bill that's been placed in Parliament, and there's one important sense in which they were different. They both included definitions of Tobago and Trinidad. And
now, you'll realize that what she said, they had a July 31st deadline. July 31st, 2018 deadline is what they had. So let's keep listening.
that's a glaring omission in this bill. But my summary comments are these, that this bill, notwithstanding its intent, doesn't succeed in delivering self-determination to Tobago. There are two senses in which we need to consider that. One is political, and a crucial one is the economic self-determination, mechanisms to promote the achievement of economic self-determination rather than the growing dependence that we see exhibited in the data. So we need some reworking. And it also doesn't succeed in upgrading our democracy beyond what we now have in the current THA Act. Some reworking is also needed in that regard. To deal with all that reworking, I want to agree with the position I heard articulated by our Chief Secretary, our current Chief Secretary, which is that a common position across Tobagonians should formulate a common position and submit that common position to you as a committee. And that common position has not yet been articulated, and this bill doesn't represent it. So I want to agree with the Chief Secretary on that, and in that context, commit to working with and supporting and articulating elements of that common position that you can receive as a committee to do your work. There are some specifics. Yes.
Mr. James,
Yes.
in relation to that point specifically, the life of this committee ends on July 31st if we do not get an extension by the Parliament. Would it be possible for your team to give us those submissions before that date? Because we are working with a specific time, because we understand that this has been on the table for years, and we really are determined to ensure that we come to the Parliament with a bill that both Tobago and Trinidad accepts as what Tobago and Trinidad want. So we have a July 31st deadline. Can I ask whether or not you'd be able to give us some written, concrete submissions before that date?
Well, there are two comments I'd make there. One is we have a number of things we can already send to you that the bill should address. But secondly, in terms of teamwork, we could do our best to send you something as soon as possible, taking into account the fact that you have a deadline. It would be worth a while to notice, though, that this matter is so important that we've got to get it right. We've got to get something that all sides in the Parliament can support, both the opposition and the government. And I want to agree with your early comments when you started the discussion, that a major part of our objective here is to upgrade our democracy. And there are critical elements in that direction that we don't have at all, not mentioned in the bill. And that's the very first specific that we would address in any document we send to you. The country has signed on to the Sustainable Development Goals, and a big part of those goals is inclusive government. There is no effort in this bill at all to deal with that issue. And after you take our history, long history, from slavery to now into account, one of the major objectives, anybody framing a serious constitution, to say nothing of an amendment on behalf of the people of Tobago, taking steps in that direction, should care a lot about mechanisms to allow the public to be properly integrated into the process of governing beyond elections. So we will have recommendations in that direction that we want to raise with you. A critical issue that this bill fails to address is truly the definition of Tobago and the definition of Trinidad. And if the goal is equality of status, we're going to need that definition. The bill itself, in that context, cuts off into the fourth schedule a number of areas that Tobago and the Tobago legislatures, the Tobago legislature as defined in the bill, should have a say in many elements, including foreign affairs. And the government of Trinidad and Tobago, and by extension the government of Trinidad, will have a say in those areas, and Tobago will not under these provisions. And that will not work in the end. Once you start to attempt serious development here in Tobago, the people here will find, the legislature here will find that it will need a say in many of those areas in order to shape sound policy for successful economic development, especially here in Tobago. And so we'll need to deal with that, and we can send you comments in relation to that specific fact. There is, in addition to that, this challenge that we will have with the Fiscal Review Commission. As it is designed now, it is accountable only to the government in Trinidad. Let me put it that way. In that sense, the government of Trinidad and the government of Trinidad and Tobago. Now, when I first read the bill, I asked myself, what if the people of Tobago, and specifically what if the Tobago legislature, disagrees with the provisions made, the arrangements made and proposed by the Financial Review Commission? We have no dispute resolution mechanism in the bill. We have no way for the Financial Review Commission to reflect the intents and the policies of the Tobago legislature. So it is just going to be a prescription for further warming of the waters on the matter of anti-Trinidad feeling and secession. And so you need to treat with that by a redesign of this Financial Review Commission. The other thing about the provisions for financing of Tobago is that they are ill-conceived. Let me join with you the clarification of what the results of the Dispute Resolution Commission really were. The 4.03%, as Mr. Atta was pointing out, really did reflect, I was part of the commission, so I can tell you, really did reflect the proportional allocations of national funds to the citizen, equal treatment of every citizen. That's where the 4.03% came from. Tobago's population at that time was 4.03%. As Ms. Kojo has indicated, it's now about 5.1%, somewhere in that zone. So if we are going to maintain that principle, the base should move upwards. Now, the 6.9% came from the work we were doing at the time to estimate the development needs of Tobago. We framed the development budget under Chief Secretary Hochoi Charles and came up with the estimates that we needed somewhere in the region of about $2 billion to get started. Now, that's where that came from. And if you take the gap between the 4.03% and the 6.9%, and you move the base up by 5%, then the upper end will move to about 8%. But I think we made a slight error in our work in the Dispute Resolution Commission in that we didn't properly take into account a third element that has to do with the financing of development of Tobago in the national interest. So those percentages we're talking about are allocations to the THA. But if you look at the data, and if you look at the state of the national economy, the country knows that we have to diversify this economy to avoid the negative effects of the oil shocks. What you will find when you do the analytical work is that the mechanisms of diversification hugely lie in developing the Tobago economy. This is where we will have the best opportunities to develop a diversified tourism sector in which we adjust the reasons people have for coming to Tobago and to the country beyond sea, sun, and sand. And so the key thing is that investment in that way, investment to develop the potential of the Tobago economy and deliver the self-determination on the economic front that Dr. Mahabir was talking about, requires investment on a scale above the potential of the Tobago legislature, even if you gave 8%. So this bill has to make clear provisions for the national government to invest in the development of Tobago in the national interest if it thinks that that is what will help to achieve the diversification goal. And what that means...
May I ask a question,
yes.
Mr. James? Sorry to cut you. So are you suggesting, therefore, that within the bill, which will be a constitutional, which will have a constitutional remit, that the bill itself should state that there must be investment in Tobago to ensure diversification? Is that what you're saying?
It must be written in such a way that if the national government, which I conceive properly as government of Trinidad and Tobago, assuming there's government for Trinidad and government for Tobago, the national government could see, as it is doing now for oil and gas. When you invest in oil and gas in Trinidad, you invest in the industry based mainly in Trinidad, in the national interest, and Tobago gets a share. Now, if the country perceives that the best way to diversify the economy is to develop the Tobago economy, it must be able to come.
So let me just chime in that part. If you've ever actually looked at the Tobago PSIP, you will recognize that what she's talking about is really not what actually happens. And the degree of investment that happens in the Trinidad PSIP is nothing compared to the degree of investment that needs to happen in the Tobago PSIP. So for example, if this was working the way it should, for example, the fact that the government is taking the money to build the airport and that is still central government but in Tobago, that is something that should have been in the Tobago PSIP, but it is not. So when you really look at the developmental plans of the Tobago PSIP, it's nothing. It's nowhere in terms of large scale planning as relates to the Trinidad PSIP. And when you're looking at the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan for Tobago, we all know that the Tobago House of Assembly has not been following with the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan. So for her to even say that the PSIPs are based on the Comprehensive Economic Development Plan, those of us in the THA knows that that is not actually true because we have not been following the government, the comprehensive economic development plan. I just had to say that.
As a country, now if the country perceives that the best way to diversify the economy is to develop the Tobago economy, it must be able to come as a country and invest in Tobago, and the proceeds from that shared across the country in the same way. That has to be invest to that which is provided by 4.03% to 6.9%, or 5 to 8, as the case might be. That's not sufficient.
Yeah, thank you, Madam Chair. I needed a clarification, Dr. James, and
Yes,
that
yes,
is, are you saying that in addition to the PSIP of the Tobago government, the PSIP
So I'm seeing Megan asks, what is a PSIP? PSIP is Public Sector Investment Program. Public Sector Investment Program, that's what PSIP stands for. So that is where you get the big, large-scale investments happening. So just a quick example. The fact that, for example, when we get our budgets every year, we get the 2 point something billion, and of the 2 point something billion, we would see maybe 500 million, 600 million for development, DP programs. Like some of those DP programs should really be PSIP, like large scale development programs. So let's just say, for example, we excuse me. Let's say, for example, we wanted to do the University of Tobago, and we know that the University of Tobago would take way more money than we normally have in our development program budgets. We could then have a PSIP program specifically for the University of Tobago that gets $1 billion, because we know that that is what it takes to really develop the University of Tobago. And the little bit of money we get every year in our DP program will not work. So I mean, the fact that, and you see how quickly she jumped back and pushed back on it, because the whole anything to them that looks like giving Tobago more money than what we currently get, they push back on so quickly. She so quickly pushed back on that. But I'm glad that Dr. James spoke up about it.
of the arm of the unitary state of Trinidad and Tobago should also specifically include projects in Tobago which would come under the financing of central government. That the PSIP of Trinidad and Tobago should include projects in Tobago which are of a national interest and which will aid in the process of economic development of both Trinidad and Tobago.
Yeah, and if you have equal status, so you have a government of Tobago and a government of Trinidad and a government of Trinidad and Tobago, then you could see how that makes sense. The government of Trinidad and Tobago could invest in Trinidad in the national interest, or in Tobago in the national interest.
May I say something before we go too far with this argument? As the minister responsible for the PSIP already does that. Already. As a matter of fact, one of the documents that is presented to the Parliament is the PSIP, which is a national PSIP, and then there is a Tobago PSIP, which is specific to Tobago. So I mean, we could have this argument, but I just prefer that the record is set straight. There's already that in existence. So there is no need for us to argue this point. There is a Tobago PSIP, which comes from the Economic Development Plan of Tobago. So it's not like Trinidad sits there and says, this is what Tobago has to do. The THA sends to Trinidad, this is our economic plan. The THA also sends to Trinidad, this is our budget. Sometimes they don't get everything, all the amounts that they ask for, but there is a Tobago PSIP. So when you get the documents in your package, apart from the yellow books and so on, there's a social development PSIP, there's a Tobago PSIP, there's the national PSIP. So that's already done.
Yeah, I just want to draw your attention to the fact that even though we see it in the airport investment, we're seeing it in the sandals and so on, but it's the mechanism in the bill doesn't specifically address it. So it will be a matter of default that you choose to do it if you feel good down in Trinidad. But the provisions in the bill, which we're addressing now, do not address that issue.
All right. Mr. James, apparently you're generating quite a lot of interest, even before you've completed your submission. So I have Member Cummings aching to speak, and then I have Member Rambarat, who also wants to speak. Anybody else before Mr. James concludes? Mr. James, you're causing problems.
Yes, Member Cummings.
So,
Thank you.
Member
Thank you.
Cummings.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. It's not so much of an ache, but I will proceed with my question to Dr. James. You're the second presenter who raised the issue of the omission of a definition for Trinidad and a definition for Tobago in the bill. I have my own ideas, but I would like to hear from you what is the thinking behind the question of including the definition, please.
Equal status. If you are going to achieve the goal you set out in the bill, clause 5, that you want to provide for equal status between Tobago and Trinidad, A, we have to know what is Tobago, and B, we have to know what is Trinidad, and neither is defined here, and what is Trinidad and Tobago, so we can make a judgment as to what equality of status applies to. Right now, there is no equality of status achieved in this bill because Tobago is defined in terms of 11 miles around its baseline for the purpose of making law and not any other purpose. There is no equivalent definition for Trinidad, just as the issues arise with respect to the fourth schedule and all of those kinds of things. There is no Financial Review Commission for Trinidad. There is no equality of status in the bill, and a major part of that is because you haven't defined what you mean by Trinidad and what you mean by Tobago and what you mean by Trinidad and Tobago. For example, if you had 11 miles around Trinidad too, then we could say the rest is Trinidad and Tobago in some sense outside of those 11-mile boundaries. And then the equality of status applies to 11 miles around Trinidad and 11 miles around Tobago. As it is now, the way we think of Trinidad and Tobago in Tobago is that Tobago is half the country, not 10% or 5%. We are half of the nation made up of 2 islands. And in that context, equality of status means you provide similar provisions for Trinidad as you provide for Tobago.
And there it is, people. There it is. That is the document that is currently before the GSC. That was a hearing of the GSC in 2018. They've had other hearings. They've had other hearings in Trinidad. I'm not sure they've had any others in Tobago. So that was one in Tobago, and they've had others in Trinidad. And we are yet to see anything about the report coming out of that GSC. And it is that report that the Prime Minister is saying he's waiting for to then see basically if he could take it back to Parliament to have them vote on it. And somehow all of this is supposed to happen just before election. And we again are going to see where PNM, UNC, any of them down there. And this is why if you go back to, I would really recommend that you go back and look at the 3 presentations that were made in the Tobago House of Assembly last sitting by Minority Leader Assemblyman Watson Duke, Assemblyman Farley Augustine, and myself, and why we were so angry. And yes, we were angry. I got up there and I did not even present what I came to present because I was so angry, because all of this, everything that I highlighted for the last hour and whatever has happened, and we know that this has happened. That JSC happened in 2018, and it was because of all of those understandings that we said, we know that they are going to be playing smart with foolishness in Trinidad over the next couple months. PNM is going to say, we bring it before the parliament and your UNC people did not vote. And they've said it, PNM and Tobago said it several times. They said it so many times at that last sitting that it really, really annoyed me, because PDP seems to be the only group of people really pushing this. So what we said was, given that all of that is going to happen, given that we know all of the hoopla that's going to happen in Trinidad, given that we know it is now going to be a blame game between UNC and PNM, UNC and PNM, what we suggested is that Tobago, House of Assembly, all of us, collectively, minority and majority, go to Trinidad and say, okay, given what is happening down there now, given all of these issues with the bill that's there now, and there are other issues. Have you recognized Dr. James spoke about the Fiscal Review Committee and all of that? I mean, I could do a whole 2, 3, 4 hour live talking about the bill itself alone and all of the issues relating to that. But given that all of that is happening and there were so many questions and so many concerns and so many hoodwinking and all kind of thing, what we should do in the interim is go to the same parliament and let them know that with a simple majority, they can change the current THA Act to give the Tobago House of Assembly the authority to make laws as it relates to the things relating to the fifth schedule of the Tobago House of Assembly Act, without having to go through the whole hoopla of sending it to cabinet, sending it to parliament, and nothing happening. That, my dear, is what we are fighting against. That is what we are up against, and that is why I wanted to take the time today. And I know it is not one. It's not one of those hoopla. It's not one of those loud and rah-rah kind of thing. It is not one of those kinds of discussions. But we needed to have real discussions, man talking to man, big people talking to big people, because this thing has been going around, this thing has been sickening, going around in circles. And it seems like as long as we're waiting for PNM and UNC thing to happen, so somebody else has to come and push it. And this is why having these two PDP Tobago East and Tobago West seats are so critical. Because I don't know if you heard the Prime Minister in his thing on Channel 5 basically spoke about the fact that if anybody who is not in Parliament telling you anything about self-governance, they're talking stupidness in essence. And this is why we need Mr. Watson Duke and Mr. Shea Grace Boris in Parliament, who were not PNM or UNC pushing this. Because we are going to have to be the ones to really, really push this. We are going to have to be the ones to negotiate with those two other large entities that just keep playing football with Tobago. We are going to have to really, really work that out and stand really on behalf of Tobago, and really, really for the first time since Mercy Robinson and Hotchoy and the times, have people really, really, really stand up for Tobago against what is happening down there in the parliament in Trinidad. Tobago, that is why we need every single one of you. We need every single one of you to come out and give us that opportunity. Because as you could see, I outlined from since 2009, 2007, all the way now, all of the back and forth and the hoopla and the whatnot, and all kind of story. So they will quickly tell you that they have been doing this and they have been doing that, but the proof is in the pudding, and it is in the eating. And what we're seeing right now is that it didn't really have no pudding, and it didn't have no eating going on in Parliament, because all of them down there playing the fool of themselves. And we, Tobago has to suffer as a result of it. Because as you listen to Dr. Valis James, for example, you recognize that when we talk about investing in Tobago, it seems like to them this whole idea of investing in Tobago is like sacrilegious, is like blasphemy. How dare we talk about investing in Tobago? And that is where we need to be. We have been investing in Trinidad for all of these years. And if Trinidad and Tobago really is to stand side by side, we need to also do some investing in Tobago. And yeah, you would hear the minions come and talk about the $50 million that they gave to the tourists hotels to thing. Like that money, that nothing. That is absolutely nothing. That $50 million, please. So when we're talking about investment, we're talking about real large scale investment. The way they can put $1 billion on a project in Trinidad, that's the kind of large scale investment we are talking about in Tobago. So guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you for sharing your life. If you missed the first part of it, I would encourage you to go back and listen to the first part of it, because I had outlined all of the steps from about 2007, 8, 9 up until where we are now. Again, highlighting why it is absolute foolishness for us in 2020 to be now talking about going before the parliament with this Tobago autonomy thing at this late hour, just before elections, when we know it is going to be a political issue again, a partisan issue again. We don't have the time, and we as Tobagonians should not be accepting that kind of foolishness from those who are supposed to be standing up for us, for those who, when you go on election day and you're ready a finger, the people who you're ready a finger for should not be treating you with such disdain, should not be treating you as if you're stupid. And every time they come out and say something as foolish as what the Prime Minister said the other day, it's because they're calling you stupid. And we as Tobagonians should never accept that from the people who we put there. So guys, thank you all so much for tuning in. Thank you all so much for listening. Thank you all so much for sharing. Share it with others so that they could also hear about it, and so that we know what we are dealing with, because this is what we're dealing with. I really wish the technology worked so that I could have actually shared these documents with you. But the links that I put there, the links for the two parliament thing, they're there. I also put the links for if you are interested in the drafts of the bills. All of the drafts are right there on the parliamentary website. I could send you a copy of the report that was done by the last groupings of people in Tobago and so forth, so that we could really be educated when we are having these discussions, and we are not just having people throw foolishness at us because we don't know. So guys, thank you so much. Have a blessed evening. Hope you are ready for work tomorrow, because most of us are going back out to work tomorrow, and we could do this. We can pull together and we can collectively do this. All right, guys, thank you all so much. Again, share the chat, share the live, and send me a message, send me an email, send me a WhatsApp, send me whatever if you need more information about this. And I'll continue to keep doing these kinds of sessions, because this is what we need. We can't have them keep fooling us. We can't have them keep peeing on our backs and telling us it's rain. All right. Have a blessed night. Thank you.